that we've gotten an idea as to how the layout works, welcome again. I'm doing this for the recording. So if you're watching this later on, if you have any questions, you can always reach me. I'll be sharing my contact information later. My name is Brenda Kasuva. For the people who are joining us live on the chat, I just want to get an idea as to how long you have been licensed. So find the chat box again and let me see some feedback. How long have you had your real estate license? If you're not licensed, that's fine. You can put 0, don't have one. Thank you, Tara. Thank you, Elle. Wow, you're specific, 6.5, nice. Oh, Lorraine is making me do math. October 2019, almost a year. Welcome. Tiffany, 3 years, good. So I think we have 9. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So on your screen, you should see the question. How long have you had your real estate license for Maryland? Tiffany, thank you. 3 years. Damika, 3 years as well. Let's see, who am I missing? Myself. Oh, Jennifer is listening. Lorraine has responded. Tara. Okay, we're good. Thank you all. Let's get started. This is something that is being presented to you by the Education Committee. We volunteer as part of education. We thought it would be a good idea to offer something to our members as a benefit. They are virtual education sessions. So if you're a member of GBBR, this is a member benefit. If you're not a member of GBBR, that's fine. These sessions are open to anyone. They do have to be GBBR members. So if you want to share it with others, please do so. This is where I turn off my video, and this is just my mindset. It gets confusing when you're seeing my picture and I'm also talking. So this is briefly where you're just going to hear my voice. My name is Brenda Kasuva, and I am a real estate educator and also a real estate agent. I have been licensed since 2004. I stopped counting. And I also teach all the classes. So what I say is I kind of start off your real estate career and I make sure that you maintain it with the continuing education classes and on to professional development. I'd love to connect with you already. If I haven't on social media, just search for my name, Brenda Kasuva, and that's my contact information there should you have any questions. So now come back and turn on the video. So some of you, depending on the device that you're using, if my video slide or my tile is a little bit distracting for you, you always have the opportunity to, let me see what I'm able to do. Okay, so right now I'm spotlighting myself. On your device, if that's distracting to you, you have the option to minimize it or to move it around by just holding on to it and dragging to whatever position that you want the video tile to display. For those of you who are on a computer, sometimes having the video tile is a little bit distracting. You can always on the tiles. So here I'm describing for those who are using their computer. If you're looking at the video tiles, you have 3 options. You have the option to minimize it. You have one which just has one rectangle or square. You can click on that and that will only spotlight the person who's speaking. You have the one that has 2, like an equal sign. You'll only see 2 people. And then you have the other one with many dots to it. That's where you're seeing everyone. So pick the one that you feel comfortable using and seeing as we go along. How are we going to access all the other sessions that are being offered? I have the screenshot of the GBBR website. You can access it one or 2 ways. I'm showing you by clicking on classes, or at the top under calendar, you click on classes and events calendar. And then you will see, let me see if I have my slides correctly. There you go. Or the other way is to scroll down on the GBBR website. If you scroll down, there's where they have all the blogs or articles that they have shared with us. There's one that says virtual classes offered, and then you will see a list of all the classes. Should you have gone through the calendar, it's all been mapped out into July. It's every Wednesday and every Friday between now and I believe July 17th. I might have that date wrong, but it's somewhere mid-July where we have the sessions from 11:30 within less than an hour, depending on questions. The sessions are done. They will be recorded and available for you also to check out later. So feel free to share with anyone. When you click on it on the calendar or on the main page, this is what you see. You see the date, the time, the topic, and the link to register for the session. Anything that I'm talking about today is going to be almost like I borrowed from the continuing education class that Brokerage, Relationship, and Disclosures. So I wanted to also share with you, for those of you who do need your continuing education classes and you're not comfortable or unable to go to the Greater Baltimore Board of Realtors and attend classes physically with an instructor. So GBBR, if you didn't know, is now offering the classes face-to-face. There's a limit as to how many people can be in the room. So if you wanted to take the classes online, so continuing education is every 2 years, we're supposed to take 15 hours. I think something is distracting me, so bear with me, let me take care of that. So every 2 years, we're supposed to take 15 hours to renew our real estate license. And this is quick. If you've been licensed, most of you, it's been at least over 6 months. So these are topics that I'm just reminding you of that we need to take. The mandatory topics are 4. Right now you're seeing 3. We have the legal updates, fair housing, code of ethics, 3 hours for legislative, code of ethics, 3 hours as well. Fair housing is 3 hours. The 4th mandatory class recently changed its name from MREC agency. It changed the name to now Brokerage, Relationship, and Disclosures, BRAD. And this is also 3 hours going into that relationship between the broker and the client. If you're a salesperson, then you only need 4.5 hours. If you're a broker, manager, or team leader, as part of your 15 hours, 3 hours is dedicated to that course referenced to as broker supervision, a course that is highly recommended for those of us who are salespeople to take. That way you get a good understanding as to why it is your broker is asking you for some information, or your team leader or the office manager. So earlier I was having the conversation of if you're not comfortable yet to take the class face-to-face, or it's limited because of how many people can be in a room, you do have the opportunity to take the classes online. So I'm just pointing out that GBBR does have online classes, and online here I'm talking about on demand. You can start the class and finish however long it takes you, or how quickly you're able to complete that course. That option is available. Where do you access this? From the calendar, you click on Online CE, and then this is what the screen presents. You will select Maryland as your state. You will then select which type of license you have and what it is that you need. You'll see 2 options: continuing education and professional development. I'll talk about professional development in a moment. So here's where we have the on-demand professional development classes. So these are the courses right now that I just wanted to promote in case you're not aware. These are the classes that are not CE, but go towards you improving yourself. So right now, the 9 of us that are here are taking the time to learn something to implement in their business. So we have these classes that are available for no CE, but for your professional development. And here on the right, you can see the cost, and you have an idea which ones you want to get more better in knowing. So take advantage of that. And that again was from the GBBR website. You click on classes, online CE, and you'll have the option for the continuing education classes or the opportunity to, and right here at the top, I don't know if you can see it, I'll try highlight it. When I shift my head, it's because I'm looking on my phone to see whether you're able to see it. But right here is this option for continuing education. That's where you're able to get a list of all the CE classes. Okay. Let me clear that and let's keep going. So here is where I pause and see if there are questions so far and what we've talked about. So usually with questions, you have the opportunity, since we're not that many, you have the opportunity to click on your microphone and speak, or you can put your comment on the chat. I got feedback from someone, thank you. I'll keep going. So brokerage agreements. Here, I'll speak for probably 20 minutes. Some of these you already know. However, I'm going to have a disclaimer. Your agreement that you get signed with the seller, buyer, landlord, or tenant is between who? Between the broker and the client. So remember that it's between the broker and the client. So whatever I'm going to be talking about is going to be an overview. Your broker has the final say. So if your broker wants it done a certain way, that's what I'm going to recommend you check in with them. And then the other thing I'm going to have a disclaimer is that since a brokerage agreement is an employment agreement that involves what job you're doing, what is required of them, and what do you get paid or how much do you get paid. So here I need to call upon antitrust laws and have a disclaimer or a note up front that when we get to, if there's any conversation about commission, keep in mind, please do not talk about numbers. And I know it's hard, so sometimes I'll be using my hands, and depending on my virtual presentation, hopefully you'll be able to see my hand. I'm looking at myself and I can see that you can see my hand. So please let's not talk about numbers when we are talking about the commission. So hopefully you're good with that, and I'll get started. So I'm just going to first talk about the rules in terms of what is expected or required in order for these brokerage agreements. Remember, your broker still has the final say. Here I'm getting into the rules and best practices. I mentioned this, so I'm going to repeat it again. These agreements are between your broker and your client. Broker here could be substituted with who? Your office manager or the supervisor of your office. Believe it or not, there's some people who think that the team leader is the one that owns these agreements. Sorry, they do not. It's between the broker and the client, and the broker has the opportunity or the right to hire, let's say, your office manager to be able to function as the broker in place for that office. So these agreements are between the broker and the client. Something that, again, should be assumed, but I have been surprised, these agreements need to be in writing. So if a seller says, Brenda, I want to sell my house, great. Normally we're quick enough to set up a listing appointment. We go in and get the listing agreement signed. However, on the buyer, there's a little bit of hesitation on that side. If you're working with a buyer and you're representing yourself as their agent, then you do need to have that agreement in writing. And we shall get into how long and termination in a couple minutes. So when I pause that they should be in writing and they are between the broker and the clients, the one that I'm going to be referencing to is the one that is provided to us by the Maryland Realtors. Now, they are about, the last time I remember, about 46,000 of us in Maryland that have a real estate license. About 27,000 are realtors. Why do I bring up those statistics? About 20,000 of the real estate licensees out there are not realtors. Therefore, they will not be using the Maryland Realtors form. So here, when I'm using the Maryland Realtors form, is because of the location that I am in. GBBR is part of Maryland Realtors, so that's what I'm using as a sample. But don't be surprised if you get an offer or if you see a listing that doesn't have the Maryland Realtors logo, because there are 20,000 of us that do not belong to Maryland Realtors. So this is going to be our guiding point. And then another disclaimer is what? Your broker could have changed a couple of things, and that's okay. Follow whatever your broker is stating. That's why today I'm keeping it on the surface in terms of what is expected. So now that I've introduced what forms we're going to be talking about, majority of you do have a contracts program that is online. You either have .loop, DocuSign, or any of the, .loop, or what's the other one? .loop and Zip Forms. Now I'm blanking on the other one that partners up with DocuSign. I think it's, well, never mind. Your contracts program are online. And if at any time you wanted to get the forms, you are able to get them as a member of Maryland Realtors, to go to marylandrealtor.org, and you're able to click on statewide forms and access the forms there. So let me pause a little bit. I'm going to shift my screen a little bit and go into my first point, which was that the agreements are between the broker and the client, and then also that they need to be in writing. Your screen has shifted a little bit. Let me get my layout correctly. And I see there's a note for me on the chat. So I don't know if you're seeing these. Okay, no question. Okay, thank you. I was leading you to this page. And I'm waiting for a couple of seconds for it to reflect. So Maryland Realtors website. Okay, another question came in. Okay, Elle, awesome. Thank you for your feedback, Elle. So I am on the marylandrealtor.org website. And I mentioned that you go to statewide forms. It will ask you to log in. When you log in, then this is where you get a list of all the forms that are pertainable to our business. Today, I'll be going in these 2 or 3 depending on time. So we're focusing on the buyer side or tenant side, and then we're also focusing on the seller side. And if we get time or questions on the lease one, we shall go through that. I'm getting to the point that I mentioned. It's between the broker and the client. Client means who? The person who owns the property. So some of you might have experienced this, where you get a call from an individual. They tell you everything they know about the property because they live in the property. And for today's purposes, I'm going to use it's a female because I'm a woman. It's a female. She called. She tells you everything about the property because she's lived there. And you go ahead, get her name, and she tells you that someone else owns the property. Great. You either get her name, you get both names, you start writing the listing agreement. However, you never took the time to really confirm who the client is in reference to the seller side. In reference to the seller side, the seller client is going to be whomever is going to be on the deed. So the deed, here's where I'm pointing you to where you're able to get that information, not only to confirm who the client is in terms of the seller or even the landlord, but also to get some other information that pertain to the agreements. For example, is there ground rent or not? Is there a condo association or not? Some information there is information that you need in terms of the transaction. So I'm going to segue a little bit into where do you get that information is by going to the Maryland Land of Records, and the website is there. Let me, so that it's clear. So the website is mdlandrec.net. You can sign up. It's just an email and a password. You keep the same password every time when you log in. And here's where you're able, I'm not going through the website kind of training you on how it works, but here's where you are able to select the county in which the property is located and do your search and pull up the deed. Your title company is also a great resource to be able to pull these up for you, but as we know, they are probably available less amount of hours than we are, so this is a resource for you. The other resource that I know we take advantage of is SDAT, Department of Assessment and Taxation. This one, if I just go online and search for SDAT, it brings you to this website. And this is also another opportunity for you to get to know who owns the property in order for you to put it on the listing agreement. Another maybe conversation to have right now, and I'll just mention and leave it up to a conversation with your title company, is what if they have changed their names, or what if one of them is no longer with us? That's a conversation that you need to have probably with your broker or the title person. So if it was 2 or 3 people, more than one person on the deed, and that individual is no longer with us, is it an estate? Then the name will display differently on the listing agreement. That's information tabled later when you're talking with a title person. Or if the person changed their names, there are 2 schools of thought, and one could be put whatever name is on the deed, and then the title company will have an amendment saying that Brenda Kasuva was formerly known as Brenda Thompson. Or some people, the second school of thought is Brenda put whatever shows up on her government issued identification right now, and the title company will have the same type of a document which says Brenda right now was, you know, she changed her name and vice versa. So that's 2 schools of thought. However, your starting point is the deed. So I'm pausing a little bit while I go back to my presentation and see if there are any questions or feedback for me on what we've covered so far in terms of the name. And while you're doing that, I'm making sure I have my presentation coming up. So the layout is you can click on the chat. It's at the bottom or at the top. If you click on more, you'll be able to find chat, or you can click on your microphone and speak. I know T is helping me in monitoring the chat and so forth. So I don't know, T, if you've gotten any questions so far on your side. I'm clicking too fast. Okay, thank you. So she responded, not yet. Okay, so I keep moving forward. We covered the client, who's the client. Now we get into this. Sorry, that was not my plan. So the next thing we need to talk about is these agreements need to have a beginning date and an end date. So they have to have a definite termination date that is effective automatically without notice from the client, and we'll talk about cancellation notices. So here we're talking about these agreements. I kind of planted the seed earlier don't have to be for 1 year, 6 months, 3 years, 10 years, 10 minutes. It doesn't matter. As long as it has a beginning date and an end date. And in time, you'll get to have an idea as to how long is too long or how short you want them to be. And sometimes it depends on the person whom you're hopefully going to have them hire you. Sometimes they don't want to have a long marriage, right? So maybe you're going to have the agreement for, hey, we don't know each other yet, so how about we have an agreement for 2 weeks? And if you don't like my style, and if I don't like your style, then after 2 weeks, the agreement has been terminated. Some, it could be an entire month. Some could be 4 months, 6 months, 3 years, 10 years. I've seen one for 3 years. Again, there's no limitation as to how long or short these agreements need to be. Here, the rules are they need to have a beginning date and an end date. So in the listing agreement, I took a screenshot. This is where you would normally fill in how, when you start and when you end. Some brokers take the time to say that it's going to start today and it will end 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, a year from today. That's still fine because it has a beginning date and an end date. And then the other thing that I want to mention, which you'll see it on both agreements when you review them, is this part here. And I know I'm kind of highlighting, I'm not good at free flow drawing. This is the part that mentions that if you have an agreement, let's say you have an agreement for 2 months, and the buyer or the seller gets to accept an offer, or the buyer gets to put in an offer and it's accepted, and settlement date is well beyond your agreement time frame. Here's where I'm preparing you or letting you know is that if your agreement, let's say, is from June the 10th to July 10th, and settlement is going to happen on August the 28th, the agreement is automatically now going to expire on August 28th. And that's mentioned in the listing agreement where I tried to highlight, which says if a contract of sale is entered, then it shall automatically be extended. You don't need to sign a new one. That's a question that I've received before, especially on the buyer agreement. So you find the house for the buyer, your agreement was for 1 month, but settlement is a month later beyond the expiration date. You don't have to sign a new one. So we're talking about dates. On the buyer side, same thing. This could be from today, 11:45, or rather 12:15, and it's going to expire tomorrow at midnight. It doesn't matter how long it needs to be. Here, the message, it needs to have a beginning date and an end date. So we've talked about dates. We've talked about the name, how long. Now here's the other conversation on the agreement. Since it's an employment agreement, it needs to talk about what? How much? And when will you get paid? So it needs to state the amount of compensation. Now here, you're only getting paid if who gets paid? The broker. So here, whatever numbers you put in here needs to be filtered by your broker. So it needs to state the amount of compensation to be paid by the broker and whether the broker is authorized to receive it from someone else other than the client. That one, to simplify it, is when you're working with the buyer, some or all of the compensation being paid to the buyer's broker or the buyer's agent's broker is going to come from the seller. So on the listing side, in review, how does it work out? On the agreement, this is where you, the seller, with the blessing of the broker, you're tackling how much the compensation is going to be. Will it be a percentage? Will it be a flat fee? Whatever the amount is, then we start getting into how much is going to go to be offered to the people who bring the buyer. Is it going to be a flat fee or a percentage? And that is tackled here in the listing agreement. On the buyer side, remember, hopefully the way to simplify this is when I'm meeting with the buyer, I might not really know which property they're going to be purchasing yet. So when I'm meeting with them, this is going to be my client. So we are discussing what the compensation is going to be. So here's where we're going to fill out what is the compensation going to be. And I know some brokerages have already kind of put in what the compensation is going to be, or they have an additional compensation to be paid by the broker. So this paragraph might have been changed. If you're using the one from Maryland Realtors, which is blank, this is where you get to write out what the compensation is going to be with the blessing of the broker. And then it gets into when is the compensation going to get paid. So when we're talking about compensation, the other thing that I want to probably talk about is this particular part of the agreement. And I'm moving down a couple of things in order for me to be able to see it. So this is where the agreement addresses that the broker is allowed to get paid by the seller. And it says the broker is authorized to get it from the listing broker. How will it be offered, right? Through the MLS. So if it's a for sale by owner, directly from the seller. Negotiated always, the word broker and the seller. And then it goes on to say that whatever the seller is offering in the MLS, if it's a FSBO, then it's going to be kind of credited to whatever you agreed upon in 7A. So the amount of compensation received will be credited based on what you put on the prior paragraph. Now we get to probably talk about what if. So this is where I'm going to use my fingers, and if you have questions, remember to use something else other than numbers. So when we're talking about what if, so here the first what if that I have highlighted in yellow, again, I'm always going to go back to what? This is an agreement between the broker and the buyer. So all I am, and this isn't something that I use in class, all I am is a worker bee, and I'm listening to whatever the queen bee is saying. Or all I am is a minion, and I'm following whatever Mr. Gru is saying, the broker. So everything is filtered with the broker. So when I meet with the buyer, and let's assume that buyer for today's purposes, her name is Domika, then when I meet with Domika, we're going to sit down and talk about what my role is, what I'm going to do, what is expected of her, and the process, and then we'll tackle the compensation. And let's assume we agreed on this number. And then when Domika finds the property, the seller compensation offered in the MLS is here. So hopefully you're seeing I and my buyer client agreed on this. Whatever was the offered in the MLS is here. So now we have an issue with the gap. It's tackled one or two ways. One, Domika buyer, pay the difference from whatever this is and what we agreed upon with the blessing of my broker, or my broker will say, Brenda, it's okay. Let's just come down and be okay with whatever the seller offered. Again, whichever decision you make, it needs to be filtered with your broker. Now, the rare opportunities where it's the reverse. You and your buyer, L, so I and my buyer, L, agreed on this number. And then the sellers are contributing this number that is a little bit higher. The agreement already addresses that, and it says, we're just going to go with whatever higher number that was offered, and that's what the broker is going to attain. I knew that will cause some questions. So one question, and I'll read it out loud since it was sent to everyone. How often does the situation occur where the buyer have to pay any difference in the compensation. So my answer might not work for everyone. I want to say it happens a lot more than we might realize. And the reason why I use the word realize is a lot of us don't obviously share that information, but in my experience and also going around different places and teaching the classes, people do share. And again, I don't want, if you're not comfortable sharing that you've done this before, then that's okay. But if you're comfortable sharing that you've done it before, and again, the question here is being presented is that how often does it happen to where you and your buyer agreed on this, the seller is only offering this, so now we're talking about that difference between here and down here. How often does it happen where you collect the difference from the buyer? I want to say it happens a lot more than we realize. Again, the person who has the final say is the broker. And Debbie is mentioning the same thing that I'm echoing. So I'm going to read her response. More often than you think, many agents will get the full fee agreed upon per the broker agreement. Thank you, Debbie. And Debbie is an office manager, so that's what I'm saying. It happens more often than you might realize. So yes, you do have the opportunity to do so. So maybe I got some of you a raise today. At what point will you tell the buyer? Good question. So this is best practice. For me, I'm telling them before they sign the agreement, we're going through it, and I say, this is the number we agreed. And if at any time we're going to see a house that doesn't match what we agreed upon, I'm going to share it with you up front, right, to remind you. And then if we move forward and you buy the property, I'm then going to tell the title company and the lender for them to be aware of the collection of the difference, if that answered your question. Okay, so Debbie's saying the same thing. Yes, thanks, Debbie. Thanks, Deb. So yes, agreed, as part of the initial consultation or conversation, and then maybe some people will have the conversation again prior to you showing the house and when this contract is accepted. Now here, in order for you to fully get what it is you said, the lender and the title company and the broker all need to be on the same page as well. Thank you. This other part is talking about, and maybe let me not move too fast. So let me pause a little bit and see if there are any additional ones on the compensation. I think, T, we're doing good in terms of tracking the comments. Thank you. Next thing to talk about is state whether the broker is authorized to cooperate with other brokers and share compensation with other brokers and the amount of compensation. So here we're talking about how much is being paid to the buyer agent, how much is probably going to get paid to the sub-agent in that event where the buyer doesn't hire the agent with whom they are getting to be shown the property, who's filling out the documents for them. However, here is probably a moment to pause before we get into the money point or the money part. We need to address corporation, because every time people lump the two together, I hopefully want to clarify the difference between the two. So corporation is required or is expected, let me use the probably a better term, is expected no matter what. So corporation is where we're talking about what is corporation. Corporation, some will simplify as working together. I'm going to dig a little bit deeper in terms of working together. Working together on the listing side, in terms of you saying you're going to cooperate with others, as you're representing the seller, corporation is making sure I have full access to the property and I have whatever documents or information that I might need. So this is where in class I'll share an example. if Sheila got her license today, and Sheila has access to the MLS, but Sheila does not have the funds right now to be able to pay for the SentryLock app. Or let me use another example. Sheila is licensed in both Maryland and West Virginia, and she doesn't have, again, want to pay extra for SentryLock because SentryLock is not nationwide. It's not even statewide. There are certain counties or jurisdictions that don't use SentryLock yet. They have a different system, and I think it's still called Supra. So here Sheila, an agent who's licensed, but she doesn't have access to the SentryLock. Your listing has a SentryLock box. Sheila has made the appointment. She's licensed, remember? So she's made the appointment, but you send her showing instructions that tell her she needs to access the keys through the SentryLock app or using the card. So when Sheila contacts you, because she's made an appointment, corporation is what? Let's find a way to get Sheila and her buyers to look at the property. So whatever that means, is the seller the one who's going to let her in? Are you going to meet her at the property? Let's find a way to get her into the property. Please, as a side note, hopefully you know you cannot be sharing the SentryLock code to any other individual. That code is for you to be able to punch into that lockbox and you're present. So just on a side note, there's a penalty on sharing those, what are they called? The code that you get on the app, or even giving someone your card. We cannot do that. Corporation says find a way, so you'll find a way to get Sheila into the property. And then sharing information could be that this agent is from a different jurisdiction. They don't have access to the GBBR forms. So if there are any forms that pertain specifically to our market, Baltimore County and Baltimore City, make sure you have those documents available for that agent. Okay, so that's corporation. The other part of corporation gets into the money. So this is where, when we're talking about money in the listing agreement, you will probably have tackled this. A lot of agents just skim over that particular paragraph, and I'll show that a little bit later. That gets into how much is being compensated to a sub-agent, and then you're going to put it in the MLS. So here, notice we're not going to be talking about numbers. So here's where you're going to put in a number to what is being compensated on to the buyer agent and what is being compensated to a sub-agent if that applies. Digressing a little bit in terms of agency, sub-agent means what? Sheila has a buyer. Sheila works in a different company than the listing company. So in this example, Preston is the listing company is EL or Air Marketing LLC. And let's say Sheila is with Blue Realty. So now we have Sheila with Blue Realty. She has a buyer who's not going to hire her for whatever reason. Sheila is a sub-agent. Sheila will proceed, and with this transaction, obviously, if what? If she's seen a number here that she's invited to this party. If she doesn't see a number here, then she needs to call Preston and find out whether the seller will agree to that, or she now needs to get what? The buyer agency agreement signed. So when I pause, I'm making sure I'm not talking too fast and you have the opportunity to ask me questions. Okay, I think this is the last thing we're going to talk about in terms of what is expected, and then we'll go through the agreement, and there are a couple things that I'll probably highlight. The idea is these do not take more than 45 minutes. So I think we're still kind of okay. No, we are past that. I'm looking at the time. We started at 11:30. Oh boy. So hopefully we'll be done shortly. The last one is the opportunity to I'm going to be a little bit softer, the opportunity to part ways. But in the agreement, there needs to talk about how are you going to part ways. Parting ways is not only from the client perspective, it's also from my side as well. Sometimes the personalities do not work out. So in the agreement, there needs to specify what does a person need to do and what happens when they do that. So a lot of times this is something that I have seen and I want to point out. If your broker hasn't done something here, so there's this paragraph on the buyer agreement that talks about you've been hired from this date to this date. And then here it talks about how does it terminate. A lot of us leave it blank. Now, I know it's left for the brokers to fill it in. The broker has a lot, so some brokers don't fill this in. They leave it up to us, the salespeople, to fill it in. This is where you need to fill in what do you want to happen if things are not working out. So it could be verbiage, and I'm not the lawyer here. It could be verbiage saying that if you and the buyer or you and the seller are not getting along, as long as they put something in writing, it could be a letter you want it mailed, or it could be an email. And once you receive that communication, then how long does it take before truly it has expired? So for example, some people will say, in order to terminate this agreement, I need to get something in writing, and once I get it, then this agreement will terminate within 48 hours, will terminate within 24 hours. So there needs to be something there, and some brokers do already have the verbiage. If your agreement that you're using does not have the verbiage presented by your broker, please take the opportunity to do so. And I'm going to bring in fair housing a little bit and say what? It needs to be consistent. It needs to be consistent. So I'm hearing someone, I don't know if your mic is activated because you have a question. If not, then I'm going to mute you. And you can always click on your microphone to activate for you to be able to speak. So now I get into the agreements, just reviewing everything that we've talked about. So the exclusive right to sell, this is what it looks like. It's 8 pages. We've already talked about a lot of these. And this is where I just wanted to highlight 3 or 4 things, and then we'll be done. By 12:30, we'll be done. On the exclusive listing agreement, I'm scrolling down. I wanted to make sure that you have the conversation of coming soon. Coming soon, you're allowed to do so for 21 days. If the seller elects to have it coming soon, hopefully the understanding is what? Truly no one can visit the property. In today's market, can you still do a virtual showing of the house? That's still marketing, but coming soon right now, no one can visit the property, and it's good for 21 days. What else did I want to share or discuss is the open house conversation on the seller side. If you're going to be doing an open house and people have questions about properties that it's not the one that they are currently visiting, then the seller needs to be able to allow that. And this allowance from the seller is still kind of limited in terms of you can't go selling other people's houses while you're still in my house, if that makes sense. So if you're doing an open house for me in my house, I would not be happy if you're really trying to sell my neighbor's house. So the conversation here is limited to maybe the differences. Hey, our house is listed, this house that you're in right now is listed for this amount. The neighbor's is listed for this amount. Here are the differences, right? This one is an extra half bathroom. This one doesn't. So that's the conversation, but you're not really trying to sell the neighbor's houses while you're still at the open house, even though you have the consent. The last one I think I wanted to talk about was the recording. So now we have that the seller has to initial that in order for them to record me, they have to get my permission. Posting a sign is not sufficient. They do need to get my permission in order to record me. And then I think I was going to talk about two more, which is number 18, which I believe the smoke alarm one. Yes, the smoke alarm one as well. Sellers put a notice that they do need to have updated smoke alarm detectors as of January 1st, 2018, and the seller acknowledges that. Okay. Would you go over internet permissions? Oh my goodness, Deb. I don't know if, let's see, and maybe Deb, you can chime in here. So I think what you're referencing to, if you don't mind, let me just do the one last one we spoke about, which was the smoke alarm. And then the last one I'm going to talk about before we get into the marketing one is going to be the deferred water and sewer assessment. This is a conversation with the seller as well as you maybe doing your research, because sometimes the seller truly doesn't know what you're asking. So sometimes when you're asking them, do you have a deferred water and sewer assessment? A lot of people will look at you. They don't know what you're talking about. So sometimes it's how you ask the question, and sometimes it's doing your research, looking at other listings, if another listing caught it and mentioned it, or sometimes you can find it as you look at the deed, and sometimes it is how you ask the question. So sometimes I'll ask, do you pay anything else beyond your mortgage? Or can I see, it wouldn't be in a mortgage statement most of the time. So do you pay anything else extra? Do you pay something yearly that you know, could be the condo fee, the homeowners association, or anything else that you pay extra on a yearly basis? And maybe that will jog their memory in terms of deferred water and sewer assessment. Don't assume it's just for new construction, because sometimes it's a development that has been converted into public water. So let's see Deb's question. So that's all I was going to cover on that one. So Deb asked, and maybe Deb, you can help me out here. Go ahead.
If you could scroll up to the section. I just have agents always get it confused, and I just wanted to hear how you, marketing and internet, MLS internet advertisement. And just the permissions that the seller gives the brokerage. So many people like mix them all up, and first of all, I'm not even sure how it's monitored through the MLS. So
I don't either. That's why when I get here, I normally say, now this is where we have to also mention the sign. So when I get here saying, you're authorizing us to market the property to the best of our ability. In order for us to do that, some of the marketing we're going to do is take pictures of the property. There might be video. We might install a sign, and where it shall end up is pretty much everywhere. And some places, truthfully, Mr. Owner, I don't have, what's the word I'm going to use, control or say in terms of how that information is presented and for how long. So I start with that. And then here, when we get to B, truthfully, Deb, I've never experienced a seller selecting this part for letter B, because this one is a seller saying they don't want it in the MLS at all, right? And it might be a private transaction, and I'm sure there are forms created by lawyers that get into that. But probably the one that is the bigger conversation is the one that is on letter D, right?
Yes.
The one that gets into this discussion.
The comments and the automated estimate.
This is the part, and I don't know if I'm doing it right. This is the part that I say, if you're not comfortable with that, which it depends on how you present it, right? So when I prefaced earlier is that you're giving us permission to market. It's going to show up in everywhere because we want people to see it. There's some websites, Mr. Seller, that truthfully, we don't have control in terms of how the property is displayed or what it displays. You as the owner can always log in and make the changes. So if somebody has the opportunity to comment on what they're seeing, then sometimes we really don't have control to be able to edit it. And if they decide to say they don't authorize, I still have the disclaimer of sometimes it's beyond my control. You have control as the owner. You can always log into that website and share your comments or frustration. That's how I've handled that one.
Okay.
I don't know
I
if
just,
it's
it's all, people always ask me, how does
I
the
know.
MLS monitor this? And I never have an answer. So I'm,
They don't.
okay, I'm glad you don't too. Well, that makes me feel better. Thanks, Brenda.
They don't. Because, but you know, Zillow is paying the MLS to get the information. Who knows who Zillow sells that information to, truthfully, right? That's how I handle that one. I don't know if somebody has a different comment, how they have tackled it, please share. I am looking at
I'm
my
satisfied.
time.
Thank you.
Oh, sure. Let me see, chat. Could it also be linked to reviews people give their agents? They tend to refer to the homes. Give me more, Elle. The reviews people give their agents. Do you mean like if I have a website, like if I'm using Zillow and I have the reviews, or like Realtor.com and somebody's given me reviews on the agent? They tend to refer to homes, meaning if I ask for a review on a sale. So you're the buyer agent, right? And you're asking for a review from the buyer, and it's tied to what you're referring to.
I forgot I could just unmute and just talk to you instead of typing.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So, I mean, so you know how we ask for reviews, and if we ask for a review on either Realtor.com, or I know now you can do it on Yelp, or any of those platforms, because it does say unedited comments or reviews. If I send a link to a client to write me a review, I'm not editing it. So I'm thinking maybe it relates to that, because it would be in reference to that home purchase that seller was selling, even though it's after the fact. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes. But however, I think the connection of the property is more of, what is it called?
Would it be during the sale more than after the fact?
Correct. So
Okay.
What you're referring to, the reason why the property is attached to kind of show validity that Al was truly the one involved in this transaction. My opinion, my thought process on this one is talking about where somebody has seen 7939 Washington Street, and they're making comments on the property, what they thought, and so forth.
I gotcha.
So the one
so
you're
this should cover
referring-
Facebook.
Pretty much, which is a good point,
There's
right?
nothing we can do about that, because that's the only thing that comes to mind. Now that you've said that, I'm thinking on Facebook, because we do post on Facebook, and anyone can make any comment, say, oh, I live in that neighborhood, I've been in that house, but I don't know how we would control that.
I know, but true, but and we're not going to, here it says MLS participants website. Now, Facebook, MLS, I don't think they're participants, but again, it finds itself into Facebook because we put it there. So you're right. So yeah, this is one of those that I say truly it's a bigger animal than I. So yeah. Oh, that's a good one. Like when the seller asks for feedback on showing time. That's a good one. So that could be tied. Could that be tied into this because showing time is a participant or they're affiliated with the MLS? Yeah. Yeah. So probably that's a good tie in there, Sheila. That's a good thought. You know, seller, I don't know if I'm going to bring it up though, because I don't, yeah, that's a good point though that Sheila brought about. That it could be that I showed the property, you asked for my review, and now I'm giving you feedback. Thank you, Sheila. I don't know if I was cutting in and out. Okay, thank you. That's a good point, yes. Anything else? Thank you so much, guys, for attending. This was the first of many. Hopefully, we shall see you on Friday. Friday, we have a session on social media. I believe it's Anna Ferguson. I think she's doing something on Facebook, I believe. Now, I don't remember what the schedule is, but hopefully we'll see you for the next one throughout the week, throughout the month of June into July. Have a great day.
Thank you. It was great.
Welcome.